I saw what they did to Katt Williams after he spoke out, and I was told I'm next. You heard me right. The moment Katt spoke the truth, they didn't just shut him down, they erased him, and they made sure I knew that I was next. I saw the whispers, the shadows, the doors that closed behind him. It started slowly, but I feel it creeping closer every day. I wasn't supposed to talk about this. I wasn't supposed to remember it. But I can't shake it. Every time I close my eyes, it's still there, lurking in the back of my mind. I wasn't anyone special, just a guy trying to make it in the industry. I worked in production, nothing glamorous, nothing flashy. I was the guy behind the scenes, the one who saw things from the shadows, the one who overheard conversations and felt the tension before it broke into chaos. But I never thought I'd be in the middle of one of the biggest stories I'd ever hear. This happened in 2017, right after Katt Williams started speaking out more, challenging the system, talking about the things that most people are too scared to say. It was right around the time when he began calling out the very people who control everything, Hollywood, the media, the puppet masters who pull the strings behind the scenes. I remember the night I was supposed to meet him. It was supposed to be a regular meeting, the kind where you shake hands and talk about a potential project. But the moment I stepped into that room, everything felt wrong. The air was heavy, and you could feel the eyes on you even if you didn't see them. When I walked into his house, the first thing that caught my eye was the doorman, but not for the reason you'd think. This guy, this tall, stoic figure in a suit, had no eyes. Nothing. Just smooth, empty skin where his eyes should have been. I thought it was a joke, but the longer I stood there, the more I realized it wasn't. He never blinked, never moved, just stared straight ahead. But that was just the beginning. I walked through the door, and for a moment, everything felt too clean, too perfect. The house had that fresh, almost sterile feel. Everything in place, the kind of place where nothing was ever allowed to be out of order. It had the feel of a luxury hotel, but colder. The walls were all smooth marble, the kind that almost gleamed under the lights, and the floors were polished wood that creaked faintly as I stepped onto them. It wasn't a huge house, but everything in it felt expensive, immaculate, like it was meant to impress, but not overwhelm. Katt was waiting for me in the living room. He was standing by the window, looking out at the city, a glass of whiskey in his hand. The lights outside cast shadows across his face, making him look tired, like someone who had seen too much and was still trying to figure out how to make sense of it all. When he turned to greet me, his smile was genuine, but there was something behind it, something off. It was like he was trying to convince himself that everything was fine. "Glad you could make it," he said, his voice smooth, almost casual. But his eyes, there was no hiding the weariness in them. The kind of tiredness that doesn't come from lack of sleep, but from the weight of the world pressing down on you. I nodded, trying to match his tone, to mirror the casualness in his voice. "Yeah, no problem." He gestured for me to sit. I took a seat on the couch, but it didn't feel comfortable. The leather was too firm, the cushions too stiff. It felt like something I should be lounging on, but I wasn't. I was sitting on the edge, like I didn't belong, like I didn't have the right to get comfortable in this space. He poured himself another drink and handed it to me. "Want one?" I shook my head, but I took the glass anyway, just to ease the tension. We sat there for a moment, In silence, the sound of ice clinking against glass filling the room. It wasn't an awkward silence, but it wasn't comfortable either. I glanced around, taking in the space. Everything was perfect, too perfect. No fingerprints on the glass tables, no dust on the shelves, no stray object out of place. The air was crisp, like it had been sanitized just for this moment. And yet, something felt off. I couldn't put my finger on it, but the air had a weight to it, like the house was watching us, waiting for something. Katt cleared his throat, breaking the silence. It's a nice place, right? Pretty sterile, though. He chuckled, but there was no humor in it.
Yeah, I said, glancing around again. It's clean.
He nodded slowly, looking at the floor now, his gaze distant. Clean. Yeah, too clean.
I didn't know what he meant by that, but the words lingered in the air, thick with something unspoken. The tension in the room grew heavier, like the walls themselves were pushing in on us. It felt like the house wasn't just a building. It was a part of whatever was happening, like it was connected to the things Katt was trying to escape.
Katt stood up and walked over to the window again, his back to me. His shoulders were tense, like he was carrying a weight I couldn't see. You know, he said, his voice softer now, almost to himself. They're always watching, always waiting. I didn't respond, but I felt it, the unease, the way the room seemed to shift. It wasn't just the walls or the house, it was something inside him, and suddenly, I wasn't sure if this was just a casual meeting anymore. The weight of his words hung in the air, suffocating any sense of comfort. I swallowed hard, feeling the sharp chill in the air now, and nodded slowly. Yeah, I can imagine. But I couldn't. Not really. I hadn't yet seen what Katt had seen. And that's when the first real shift happened. The unease wasn't just in the air anymore. It was in the way Katt was standing. How his body had gone rigid. How his eyes kept darting to the door, to the windows. Like he was expecting someone. Or something. And that's when everything changed. As I sat there trying to ignore the discomfort creeping up my spine, something didn't feel right. It wasn't just the tension in the air, the coldness of the room. It was the people. I wasn't the only one here, but the others seemed to float in and out of the background, like shadows rather than guests. A man entered the room dressed in a black suit, looking sharp but too stiff, like he didn't belong. He wasn't introduced, didn't speak, just slid into the corner of the room and stood there, silent, eyes fixed on the ground. I noticed his posture, too rigid, too controlled. I tried to catch his eye, but he wouldn't look up. He felt more like an object in the room, not a person. Katt didn't seem to acknowledge him either. In fact, he didn't even glance in his direction. But I caught the briefest flicker in his eyes when the man walked in. It was subtle, but unmistakable recognition. Fear. Maybe both. I couldn't help but feel the oddness of it all. I shifted in my seat, trying to push the feeling down, but it wouldn't leave. Something about the way Katt was acting made me feel like I was missing something I couldn't quite grasp. He was still talking, telling jokes, trying to keep the atmosphere light, but there was this nervous energy hanging around him. His smile didn't quite reach his eyes, and his hand shook slightly as he held his drink. It wasn't obvious, not to anyone else, but I saw it. I saw the way his fingers curled tight around the glass, like he was trying to keep control.
Then there was the locked door.
I hadn't noticed it at first, but when I glanced toward the hallway, there it was. A door at the end of the corridor, completely out of place. It was a heavy wooden door, but there was something about it that screamed wrong. There was no handle, no way to open it. Just a strange, heavy presence in the room. It didn't belong. The hallway outside was empty. No one moving. No sign of anyone coming or going. But something about that locked door, the way it stood there, waiting, just gave me the creeps.
Katt caught me staring at it, and almost too quickly he turned his back to me, as though trying to hide his unease. It was like he didn't want me to know something about that door, something I wasn't supposed to see. But in that moment, I knew there was something behind it. Something locked away. And whatever it was, Katt knew it.
The rest of the staff were in the background, moving like they had a script to follow. One of the staff members came over to pour more drinks, but didn't speak, didn't make eye contact, just handed me the glass with a stiff nod, as if I was just another piece in the puzzle, another part of the scenery. There was something robotic about the way they moved, the way they didn't engage unless they had to. No small talk, no warmth. It was unsettling. I tried to ask Katt if everything was okay, but he didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked at the door again, then back at me. He gave me a quick smile, like he was trying to reassure me, but it was too forced. "It's fine," he said, too quickly. "Everything's fine."
But I could see the way his hands were shaking as he picked up his drink again, the way he hesitated before he spoke.
And that's when I realized it wasn't just the room, it was everything. The people, the house, Katt's behavior, nothing felt right. It was like I had stepped into a scene, a place I wasn't meant to be. A place that wasn't just about Katt's success, but about control. Something dark moving in the background. The door, the man in the corner, the staff who didn't even look at us. It was all part of something bigger, something I wasn't ready to see. Then, just as I was about to ask him what was really going on, the lights flickered. Not just a quick flash. It was like the entire room paused. The hum of the lights, the quiet murmurs of conversation, everything stopped for a split second. And then it flickered again, longer this time. The shadows seemed to stretch across the walls unnaturally, as though the room itself was pulling in on us. That door seemed to shift, like it was breathing with the room. The air felt heavier, thicker. I could hear the faintest sound coming from the other side. A rustling, a low, almost inaudible sound that wasn't natural. It was like something, or someone, was on the other side, moving, waiting. My heart skipped a beat. I looked at Katt, expecting him to acknowledge it, to say something, anything, but he just sat there, staring at the door. He didn't move, didn't blink, didn't even breathe, like he was afraid the wrong sound would break the moment. His whole body was tense, as if he was bracing for something to happen. And then, the whisper. It was soft at first, so faint I wasn't sure if I'd heard it or imagined it. But then it grew louder, clearer. The words were so quiet, almost lost in the hum of the house, but unmistakable.
"Come closer."
The room was silent. The staff, the man in the corner, even Katt. Everything was still frozen at that moment. I felt the hair on the back of my neck stand up. and I realized with a sickening certainty that whatever was behind that door, whatever Katt had been avoiding, wasn't just in his mind. It was here. It was real. I wanted to run, but I couldn't move. I wanted to scream, but the words wouldn't come. Katt didn't move. The room didn't move. Everything was waiting. But that was just the beginning. Everything felt off. But it wasn't until that moment that I truly understood how deep it went. I didn't know what to call it. Paranoia, instinct, maybe just plain fear, but I felt it in my bones. The room, the people, Katt, everything had shifted from uncomfortable to outright suffocating. It wasn't anything specific at first, just a general sense that things weren't as they seemed. Katt had stopped talking, stopped moving as much. His eyes darted around the room, never really focusing on anything, and I could see the sweat gathering at his temples. The other guy in the suit was still there, standing in the corner, but this time, I saw something I hadn't before. His hands were clenched into fists at his sides, his jaw tight, like he was trying to hold himself back from doing something, or like he was waiting for something to happen. Then came the real shock. Out of nowhere, the lights flickered. A sharp, quick stutter that didn't seem right, like the power had almost cut out. I've seen power surges before, but this wasn't the same. It wasn't just the lights. Everything shifted. The air turned colder, almost too cold for a room that had been perfectly warm just moments ago. I felt a chill crawl up my spine, and for a split second, I thought I saw something in the corner of the room, just a shadow. But it moved, and it was too quick. I looked at Katt, his face pale, lips tight. He didn't say anything, but his eyes. They were locked on the door again, the locked one at the end of the hallway, the one I'd been trying to ignore. There was a moment of silence, a pause like the whole room was holding its breath. Then, without a word, Katt stood up. He moved like he was in a trance, walking slowly toward the door. "Where are you going?" I asked, my voice sounding more desperate than I wanted it to. He didn't answer. He didn't even look back. It was like he hadn't heard me. He reached the door, and without a second thought, he pressed his hand against the wood. There was a moment of stillness, like the entire house had stopped moving. And then, the air shifted again, as if something inside the room had broken. The door creaked, loud enough that it echoed through the silence. It wasn't supposed to do that. The door didn't have a handle. It wasn't meant to open. But it did. And in that moment, I knew that this wasn't just Katt going for another drink or some other trivial thing. This was different. He wasn't supposed to open that door. I wasn't supposed to see what was behind it. Then came the real shock. Katt stepped forward, his fingers brushing against the surface of the door. It opened just a crack, just enough for me to catch a glimpse of what lay inside. I couldn't see much, just shadows, a space that looked too narrow, too cramped. But there was something in there, a cold, oppressive presence that seemed to push against the door like it was trying to escape. Katt froze, his hand still on the door. His expression was unreadable, but there was something else there now. Fear. Raw, unfiltered fear. And in that instant, I knew. Whatever was behind that door wasn't just a part of Katt's world. It was the thing that had been following him, watching him, waiting. I wasn't sure if he was going to open the door fully or if he was just waiting for something to happen, but I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't stay here. Not anymore. The air in the room thickened.
and every instinct in me screamed to run, but I couldn't move. Katt stood there, in front of the door, locked in place, as if the house itself was holding him there. And that's when I realized this wasn't about him. This wasn't even about me. This was something bigger, something darker. And then the temperature dropped further, and the lights flickered again, longer this time, more violently. I felt my heart race as a low hum, barely audible, began to fill the room. It wasn't coming from any speakers or electronics. It was coming from the walls, from the floor. The house itself seemed to be breathing. Katt's hand slipped from the door. He stumbled back, looking over at me with wide, panic-stricken eyes. "We have to leave." Now his voice was strained, and I could hear the desperation in it. It wasn't just fear, it was a plea. Before I could respond, I heard it. A sound, deep in the room, echoing in my mind, more than my ears. It was a whisper, soft at first, like a rustling in the air. But then the words were unmistakable. "You shouldn't have seen this. You can't leave now." The voice wasn't Katt's. It wasn't human. It was ancient. Like the house itself was speaking. Like the door, the walls, the entire space was alive. Alive with something that had been there long before we ever stepped foot in it. Katt was shaking, his back pressed against the wall, his eyes wide with horror. "Get out! Please get out!" he whispered. But it was too late. The presence in the room had already shifted. The door had cracked open too wide. There was no escaping what had already been set in motion. The room seemed to pulse, like it was tightening its grip on us. The walls felt like they were moving in, like they were going to crush us. I could hear my heartbeat pounding in my ears, my breath shallow, ragged. And I could feel the eyes, the weight of whatever was behind that door, watching, waiting for us to make a move. And that's when everything changed. The room seemed to shrink in on itself, the air thick with the weight of what was happening. I could feel my pulse hammering in my throat, the blood rushing in my ears as I tried to move, tried to breathe, but my body wouldn't cooperate. I was frozen, like something had rooted me to the spot. My mind screamed at me to run, to get out, but my feet were glued to the floor. Katt stood still, his back to me now, as if he was in some kind of trance. The shadow, the presence was still there, waiting by the door. I could feel it, pressing in on me, growing stronger, feeding off the fear in the room. I couldn't understand what was happening, what I was seeing. Katt slowly raised his hand, almost mechanically, like he was going to open the door. I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his fingers trembled as he reached for the handle. I wanted to shout, to stop him, but the words caught in my throat. "Don't," I whispered, but it didn't matter. He was already reaching for the door. The whispering grew louder, closer. The room seemed to close in, the walls pressing down on me, suffocating me. I wanted to close my eyes, but I couldn't look away. Whatever was behind that door, whatever was calling to us, it wasn't just something we could walk away from. Just as Katt's hand touched the handle, there was a sharp, violent crack. The air seemed to snap, like a wire being pulled too tight and suddenly breaking. Katt jerked back, his body twitching in shock. I heard him gasp, like he'd been hit, like something had shocked him to his core. I don't know how I managed it, but I finally moved. I grabbed Katt's arm, pulling him away from the door with all the strength I had left.
"We have to get out of here," I said, my voice shaking. "Now." He didn't resist. He just let me pull him toward the exit, his eyes wide with something I couldn't describe. Fear, yes, but also something worse. Like he knew he couldn't escape this. Like we were already trapped, no matter how far we ran. We were halfway to the door when it happened. A voice, low and guttural, came from the room. It wasn't just a whisper this time. It was clear as day. And it wasn't coming from anywhere in the room, it was coming from inside me. "You can't run from this," it said, its tone cold and final. We froze. Katt turned to me, his face pale, his eyes wide with terror. "They're coming for us, he said, his voice breaking. "They'll never let us go. You think you can walk away after what we've seen? They don't let you leave." I felt the truth of his words like a punch to the stomach. The room seemed to close in again, heavier now, suffocating, as though we were being watched, hunted. There was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. The very air was against us. And then, before I could react, someone stepped forward from the shadows in the hallway. A man, tall and imposing, dressed in black. He didn't say a word at first. He just stood there, blocking our way, his gaze cold, unfeeling. He didn't move, didn't flinch. It was like he was just waiting. The fear that gripped me was overwhelming. I could feel it creeping into my bones, numbing me, making it harder to think, to breathe. Katt stepped back, pulling away from me, like he was distancing himself, like he didn't want to be anywhere near me anymore. His eyes were wide, and I could see it. The realization that there was no escape. "We're done," he whispered, almost to himself. "This is it." The man in black took a step forward, his eyes locked on mine. And in that moment, I knew we weren't leaving. Not alive, not ever. I felt like I was suffocating in his gaze. It was like he could see through me, like he knew everything I was thinking, everything I was trying to hide. His cold, lifeless stare made me feel so small, so insignificant. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. Then, something shifted in the air, a low hum building beneath our feet, rising in intensity, like the heartbeat of something ancient and alive. The room, the house, it wasn't just a structure anymore. It was something else, something that had been here far longer than any of us. Katt's eyes filled with tears, but not just from fear. There was something else in them now, something deeper, a sense of hopelessness that sank into my chest like a stone. "We're already gone," he whispered. "We walked into it the moment we got here." The man in black took another step closer, and with that movement, I felt the pressure in the room intensify. It was like the walls themselves were closing in, squeezing us, drawing the air out of my lungs. I couldn't even hear my own breath anymore. All I could hear was the thumping of my own pulse, beating louder and louder until it drowned out everything else. The man's lips parted, but the words that came out weren't for us. They were for something else, something just beyond the doorway. His voice was low, too low, and it echoed in my head as much as it did in the room. "It's time." And in that moment, I knew. I knew we weren't just being hunted. We were the prey. The thing behind that door. The thing that had been waiting. It wasn't done yet. It hadn't finished with us. I wanted to scream, to beg for mercy.
but no sound escaped me. Katt looked at me one last time, and his face pale and empty, and all I could do was watch as the door behind the man in black began to open wider, its creaks echoing like the sound of a coffin lid being lifted. But what happened next took things to a whole new level.
I should have never walked into that house. I should have never gotten involved. Never let myself get close enough to see what was behind that door. But now, it's too late. They're still watching. They never stop. And every time I think I can escape, I hear that voice, low and patient, waiting for me. It's inside my head now, and it won't let go. If I disappear after this, you'll know why. The thing that came from that room, the one that whispered our names, it's not just a part of that house. It's following me. It's in the walls, in the shadows, and it won't stop until I'm as trapped as Katt. They're all part of the same thing, and once you've seen it, once you've felt it, it doesn't leave. It doesn't ever let you go. So I'm telling you now, be careful. Whatever you do, don't start looking too close at what they want you to see. Because once you really know, you can never forget. And they'll come for you, too.